This case stands as a veritable house of horrors, an unparalleled crime so appalling it has become one of the most infamous true crimes to come out of the Philippines. Sit tight and brace yourselves. The following contains graphic and unsettling revelations. It was 2:58 p.m. on December 10th, 2021. Cruz Maguard, a 48-year-old public school teacher at Mariano Untal Memorial High School, was at Borjan Elementary School, where his wife, Lovella, served as the principal. With the Christmas holidays approaching, Cruz was helping with school repairs, a quiet afternoon of work before the break. 2 minutes later, Cruz's phone rang. It was a neighbor. He reported something strange. While walking past the Maguard home, he noticed the inside appeared disturbed, as if it had been ransacked. The neighbor hadn't entered, but he felt Cruz should know. Alarmed, Cruz immediately called his wife, who was on a business trip at the time, and urged her to return home. He dropped everything and left their house. The Maguard's children, 18-year-old Gwynn or Gwynn, 16-year-old Lewis or Boy, and their recently adopted daughter, Janice, had been home alone. None of the three had called to report anything wrong, which deepened Cruz's unease. By 3:15 p.m., Cruz arrived at the house. It was silent. Outside the front door, he noticed a blood-soaked blanket on the ground and a knife nearby. Cruz called out for his children, Boy, Gwynn! But there was no answer. He moved to the back door and found a way inside. Inside, the silence was unnatural. Cruz moved quickly throughout the house, his calls echoing off the walls. In the living room, Cruz stopped. There, lying on the floor, was his daughter, Gwynn. There was a towel soaked through with blood, multiple slash wounds covered her limbs and torso, and the injuries on her neck were particularly severe. Crime scene photos later showed the extent of the injuries: flesh torn apart, her head tightly wrapped in a towel. Ants had already begun to gather on her body. Not far from Gwynn, near the main door, Cruz found his son, Boy. His hands and feet were bound, a gag covered his mouth, and his body was covered in fresh stab wounds. The amount of blood suggested that the attack had occurred shortly before Cruz arrived. But one person was missing: Janice. Cruz's panic grew as he searched the house, shouting Janice's name. Then, finally she appeared. Janice emerged from her room, her hair wet, her face pale with shock. She was visibly shaken, unable to speak clearly at first. Seeing her, Cruz tried to stay calm. He immediately called the police. Officers arrived soon after, stepping into the crime scene that would later be described as one of the most gruesome in the Philippines. Blood pooled on the floors and the house bore the marks of extreme violence. Janice, trembling, said they were attacked. The house was in a state of utter disarray. Cabinets had been pried open, personal belongings strewn haphazardly across the rooms. At first glance, this suggested a robbery. But investigators understood that appearances alone could not confirm motive. To substantiate the theory, they needed to determine whether any valuables had been stolen. Concurrently, as part of the procedural protocol, the police did not immediately rule out the parents, Cruz and Lovella, as persons of interest. Investigators sought to verify their alibis and confirm their whereabouts during the time of the crime. Attention soon turned to the room where Janice, the family's adopted daughter, said she remained during the attack. The room appeared disheveled, although the details were not inherently unusual. In the case of a robbery, ransacked rooms were to be expected. However, a closer, more discerning examination began to reveal inconsistencies that troubled investigators. The disarray, while seemingly chaotic, lacked certain hallmarks of a genuine robbery. A methodical sweep of the premises yielded critical findings both inside and outside the house. Just outside the front door, police discovered a blood-stained short-sleeved shirt, which was presumed to have been discarded by the perpetrator during their escape. Further evidence emerged a few 100 meters away, where a plastic bag contained bloodied pants and underwear, which was located in a ditch. Investigators noted that this discovery suggested a deliberate attempt to dispose of incriminating evidence. Inside the house, the scene grew increasingly macabre. Near the front door, officers found a knife with a broken handle, the blade slick with blood. Scattered glass shards and broken bottles littered the living room floor, while expansive pools of blood hinted at the ferocity of the attack. Among the carnage lay a discarded machete, a baseball bat, and a hammer, each bearing bloodstains and each presumed to be a weapon used in the murders. Crime scene analysts meticulously evaluated the condition of the blood. They determined that Gwynn, the elder sibling, had likely been killed first. Her blood had partially coagulated, and rigor mortis had already begun to set in. In contrast, Lewis's blood appeared fresher, leading investigators to conclude that he was murdered shortly after Gwynn. The differing states of the bodies added weight to this hypothesis. Lewis's hands and feet were bound, whereas Gwynn's were not. This discrepancy indicated that Gwynn may have been ambushed and killed swiftly, while Lewis was restrained, possibly to prevent resistance before his subsequent murder. The sheer variety of murder weapons, a broken knife, a machete, a baseball bat, and a hammer, raised significant questions for the investigative team. The use of multiple instruments and the presence of distinctive wounds across the victims pointed the likely involvement of more than one perpetrator. This theory was further supported by the nature of Lewis's restraints. Such control over a victim, while simultaneously carrying out a brutal murder, would be challenging for a single attacker to execute. Adding to the complexity, Cruz, the sibling's father, confirmed to the authorities that the weapons found at the scene belonged to him. Their presence in the crime deepened the mystery, as the murderers appeared to have utilized tools readily available within the household. While investigators cataloged the physical evidence, one anomaly stood out as particularly perplexing. The family's laundry machine had been used, yet there were no freshly washed clothes anywhere in the house. The significance of this discovery remained unclear, but it suggested an element of post-crime activity, perhaps an attempt to erase evidence or cover tracks. Recognizing the unprecedented brutality and urgency of this case, local authorities swiftly launched a manhunt for the perpetrators. The heinous nature of the crime galvanized the community, and public officials intervened to expedite justice. Vice Mayor Joselito Penol of the Municipal Council of Malang, North Cotabato, announced a reward of 200,000 pesos for information leading to the capture of the suspects. Similarly, Mayor Pip Libungan of Tulanan offered an additional 50,000 pesos bounty. These measures underscored the gravity of the investigation and the growing demand for answers in the wake of such unfathomable violence. The autopsy on Gwynn and Lewis was conducted over 2 days, starting on December 13, 2021. Gwynn had sustained 32 stab and slash wounds, some deep enough to nearly sever her limbs. One ear had been cut off, and her neck and upper arm were nearly severed. Her body showed signs of blunt force trauma, likely caused by the hammer and baseball bat found at the scene. The backs of her hands were purple, covered in defensive wounds, indicating she fought to the end. Lewis had endured 51 knife wounds, some so deep they exposed bone and internal organs. Red marks on his neck indicated possible strangulation. Unlike his sister, Lewis had no defensive wounds, suggesting he was caught off guard and unable to attack. He also had signs of blunt force injuries on his limbs and torso. All injuries aligned with the weapons recovered at the scene: broken bottles, a hammer, a knife, and a baseball bat. Investigators quickly ruled out a robbery gone wrong. The scene appeared staged, the rooms ransacked, but only Gwynn's phone was missing. Nothing else of value was taken. It suggests the killer or killers knew the victims. It was also unusual that the crime took place in broad daylight. Before the autopsy results were made public, rumors began to circulate online, accusing Janice of involvement in the crime. Theories spread, fueled by her survival, the weapons being from the family home, and the locked front door. The accusations escalated quickly, with some even threatening Janice. Under mounting pressure, the police decided to question her. Janice described the events of the day. She had been studying with Gwynn in a shared bedroom while Lewis was downstairs in the living room. Suddenly, they heard him screaming, and that 3 men broke into the house. Both girls rushed downstairs and saw 3 men attacking Lewis with the weapons found at the scene. The attackers then turned to Gwynn. In fear, Janice fled upstairs, locked herself in the bedroom, and hid under the bed. Unable to call the police for fear of being heard, Janice texted the family group chat and later her adopted mother. "Mom, help!" The messages went unnoticed. In desperation, Janice posted on social media, "Help! Somebody has broken into the house. I don't want to die. I'm hiding in my room. Help!" She deleted the post a few minutes later, fearing the attackers might see it and find her. Janice tried calling her mother, but there was no answer. It wasn't until someone saw the post and contacted her mother that she returned the call. By then, Janice was too scared to pick up. She changed her social media username and set her phone to silent. When the house finally fell silent, Janice emerged from her hiding place. Too afraid to go downstairs, she claimed she took a shower and changed clothes to calm herself, finishing just as Cruz arrived home. But there was one issue with this story. Janice had said she locked herself in her bedroom as soon as the attack began. So why, then, did her room appear ransacked? Janice's accounts of the events, which placed Lewis as the first victim, was directly contradicted by the forensic evidence. Autopsy results and the distribution of injuries suggested that Gwynn was the initial target, not Lewis. This disparity between Janice's narrative and the physical evidence prompted further scrutiny from the investigators. As suspicions grew, the police decided to revisit statements from those close to Janice, specifically her adopted father, Cruz. During questioning, it became clear that Janice's version of events had evolved. She had previously told police that her phone was off during the attack, but Cruz recalled calling her phone and hearing it ring unanswered. When confronted with this discrepancy, Janice amended her story again, claiming she had been in the shower and therefore had not heard the phone. Cruz also provided additional information about the murder weapons that raised further concerns. The baseball bat, which had been used in the attack, had originally belonged to Lewis. He had kept it in his room, positioned on the top bunk as a form of protection. However, after being adopted by Cruz, Janice had taken over the top bunk and consequently the bat. The hammer used in the attack was a tool Cruz kept for home repairs. He was meticulous about its location, typically hiding it behind the washing machine. Cruz stated that only 3 people knew where the hammer was kept: himself, Gwynn, and Janice. This revelation suggested that the perpetrator had intimate knowledge of the family's possessions and routines. Janice's credibility was further undermined by the testimony of a delivery driver. The driver had arrived at the Maguard residence just 18 minutes before a neighbor contacted Cruz. After announcing his arrival and receiving no response, the driver continued calling out, hoping someone would answer. He eventually noticed a female figure peering at him through a door, before she abruptly walked away. The identity of the woman was never confirmed, but the incident raised doubts about Janice's whereabouts and actions during the critical moments surrounding the attack. A key detail in the investigation was the state of the front door. It had been locked from the inside, and there was no evidence of forced entry. This suggested that the perpetrators were likely known to the victims, someone with access to the house, someone who possessed a key to lock the door after the crime had been committed. The lack of forced entry narrowed the pool of potential suspects to 3: Cruz, who was accounted for at a different location, Lovella, who had been away on a business trip, and Janice, whose presence at the scene, combined with the inconsistencies in her statements, placed her under suspicion. However, the investigation was complicated by the fact that Janice was a minor, just 17 years old. In the Philippines, arresting a juvenile without irrefutable evidence was legally challenging. As a result, the police were hesitant to proceed with an arrest until more conclusive proof was obtained. Rather than arresting Janice, the authorities placed her under the care of a social welfare department. The focus shifted towards determining who physically committed the murders. If Janice's claim that multiple assailants were involved was accurate, the investigation would need to identify these individuals. On December 15th, Janice's fingerprints were discovered on the murder weapons. While this was a significant finding, it did not provide definitive evidence of her involvement. After all, Janice had lived in the home where the weapons were stored, and it was plausible that her prints were on the items due to routine handling. In light of her status as a minor, the Social Welfare Department assigned her a lawyer to ensure her legal rights were upheld. The investigation took a significant turn when Lovella, Janice's adopted mother, made a crucial discovery. While searching Janice's room, Lovella found a contact tracing form containing a QR code. The form, however, was not in Janice's name. It belonged to Esmeraldo Canelo Jr., also known as Aldo, a 17-year-old sacristan at a local church and someone Janice had known from the orphanage. This discovery prompted the police to further investigate Aldo's potential involvement in the crime. Witnesses soon corroborated suspicions about Aldo's presence in the area on the day of the murders. One woman reported seeing Aldo drop Janice off near the Maguard residence shortly before the attack. Another neighbor confirmed seeing a man, later identified as Aldo, asking for directions to the house on the morning of the murders. When shown a photograph of Aldo, the woman positively identified him as the person who had approached her husband. On December 16, 2021, Janice provided a detailed confession to her lawyer, admitting to her involvement in the murders of Gwynn and Lewis, alongside her 21-year-old boyfriend and Esmeraldo Canelo Jr. She explained that the crime was driven by deep-seated resentment and jealousy. Janice harbored a profound bitterness towards Gwynn and Lewis, feeling overshadowed by the affection their parents lavished upon them. In her eyes, the siblings represented an obstacle to the love and care she had only recently begun to experience. She articulated her motive and desire to take Gwynn's place in the family, an impulse shaped by years of deprivation in an orphanage where emotional warmth and stability were scarce. According to Janice, eliminating Gwynn and Lewis would leave her as a sole child of the Maguard family, ensuring their exclusive attention. On December 18th, Janice formally confessed to the police, though her statement was inconsistent yet again. The police tracked down and arrested Esmeraldo, who surrendered voluntarily. He too confessed his role in the murders. Forensic analysis later confirmed that blood found on the discarded clothing in the ditch was indeed his. Esmeraldo, like Janice, was a minor at the time of the murders. Consequently, he was placed under the supervision of the Social Welfare Department, as required by Filipino law. In an unrelated drug raid that same day, another 17-year-old boy was arrested for possession of illegal substances. During the search, officers discovered a cell phone that belonged to Gwynn. Tracing the serial number, they confirmed that the phone had been stolen after the murders. Investigators learned that Janice, unable to dispose of the phone herself due to growing suspicion, had enlisted Esmeraldo to sell it. Because the phone had been severely damaged by water, investigators were unable to retrieve any meaningful data from it. The boy in possession of the phone was not implicated in the murders, as it was clear he had no involvement other than purchasing the device from Esmeraldo. Due to the legal protections afforded to minors in the Philippines, the police were unable to disclose the finer details of Janice and Esmeraldo's confessions, even to the parents, who repeatedly requested information. As the investigation progressed, Janice ceased cooperating with the authorities altogether. To this day, the exact sequence of events leading up to the murders, as well as the full extent of the planning and execution, remains unclear. Also, Janice's so-called 21-year-old boyfriend was never identified, arrested, or charged. Police suspect this is a fictional character she made up with her ever-changing confessions. Some speculated the murders were even more brutal than what she confessed, likely having Lewis tied up and watch as his sister was brutally murdered, followed by him. In the aftermath of the crime, Lovella was interviewed by both law enforcement and the media. While she expressed profound shock at Janice's role in the killings, she also reflected on certain warning signs that in hindsight should have raised concern. The Maguard family first encountered Janice in 2020 when she worked as a housekeeper for a friend of Lovella's. Lovella and Gwynn often visited this friend, and the two girls, close in age, quickly developed a friendship. Janice frequently sought Gwynn's help with her studies, and Gwynn, known for her kindness and generosity, was eager to assist. Over time, Janice confided in Gwynn about her difficult past, detailing her childhood in extreme poverty and her subsequent time in orphanage after the death of her parents. Janice spoke of the overwhelming pressures of balancing her studies and work, as her employer demanded much of her. Janice shared her dream of attending university, but also revealed her anxiety about losing government support when she turned 18. Moved by Janice's situation, Gwynn urged her parents to adopt Janice. Initially hesitant, Cruz and Lovella were eventually persuaded by Gwynn's persistence, and in July 2021, 5 months before the crime, they finalized Janice's adoption. The transition appeared seamless. The family welcomed Janice with open arms, and Janice appeared to reciprocate their affection. However, as time went on, small but concerning incidents began to surface. In August 2021, Lovella's parents were hospitalized due to COVID-19, and Cruz recalled that she had set aside 10,000 pesos in the house as an emergency fund. When he went to retrieve the money, it was gone. Janice claimed that thieves stole it, yet the following day, a significant sum of cash was discovered hidden in Janice's school bag. After some questioning, Janice admitted to taking the money. Despite this breach of trust, the family chose to forgive Janice. Gwynn, in particular, was adamant that Janice should be given another chance. The family, sympathetic to her troubled past, attributed the theft to survival instincts Janice had developed during her difficult upbringing. Janice apologized, and the family accepted her apology, hoping it marked the end for her misdeeds. In the months preceding the murders, Janice's behavior began to change. Once known for her strong work ethic, a quality that had greatly influenced her adoption, she grew increasingly indifferent and irresponsible. She neglected household chores, and when reminded, she apologized but failed to follow through. This shift in behavior was troubling, but did not raise immediate alarms. Perhaps most disturbingly, on the morning of the murders, Janice did something she never had done before. She addressed Cruz and Lovella as mom and dad for the first time, an indication of her psychological state and the emotional weight of what was about to transpire. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that Janice had been dishonest about her origins from the outset. Her claims of being an orphan were false. Her parents were alive and had, in fact, spent years searching for her. When the case went viral and became widely discussed through Filipino social media, amateur web sleuths began to scrutinize Janice's past. Their efforts uncovered a nearly decade-old missing persons notice that revealed a critical piece of her history. On September 22, 2013, a young girl, approximately 7 to 8 years of age, was discovered alone on a boat in Cotabato. She identified herself as Janice, but claimed she had no recollection of her parents, home, or address. Believing her to be lost or abandoned, local authorities and concerned citizens circulated a missing persons notice, urging the public to come forward with any information. When no one responded and interest faded, Janice was eventually placed in an orphanage. The resurfacing of this notice online reignited attention on Janice's origins. It was only a matter of time before her biological parents recognized her. Born in 2005 as the youngest of 3 children, Janice's early life had been marked by turmoil. Her father's severe gambling addiction shattered the family, leading her mother to file for divorce in 2008. After remarrying and having another child, her mother managed to salvage what little remained of the family's assets and divided them amongst her 3 children. The siblings remained together briefly before being separated and placed in different orphanages. By the time Janice was adopted in 2020, she had already reunited with her biological family. However, the reunion proved short-lived. Her biological relatives later accused her of severing ties, allegedly dismissing them as too poor to be of any benefit to her. In a tragic twist, Janice's biological mother attended the funeral of Gwynn and Lewis. Overcome with emotion, she broke down in tears, repeatedly apologizing and expressing profound guilt over what had happened. Cruz and Lovella, struggling with their own immeasurable grief, encouraged her to speak to Janice and urged her to fully confess if she was truly remorseful. Acting on their request, Janice's mother attempted to visit her at the social welfare department. However, Janice refused to meet with her. Officials, citing protocol, ultimately ordered her to leave when she failed to produce sufficient proof of her identity as Janice's biological parent. But returning to the investigation, things were even more shocking. Further evidence emerged that highlighted Janice's premeditation. Screenshots of a conversation between her and an unknown individual went viral. In the exchange, Janice confessed to wanting to kill her siblings, believing it would bring her the freedom she desired. She questioned whether anyone would still accept her if she committed murder, and believed that, regardless of the sin, God would forgive her as long as she asked for it. Some sources suggested that Janice had often brought up the 2009 horror film Orphan, but this seemed speculative or mentioned in hindsight for dramatic effect. The plot of the movie, about a young girl adopted by a family who ultimately betrays and murders them, was chillingly similar to Janice's own actions. When her trial finally began, Janice was observed smiling and laughing at the parents, showing no sign of regret. Cruz and Lovella expressed in interviews that they would have been willing to forgive Janice if she had shown even a small amount of genuine remorse, yet she remained unsympathetic, which made the grieving process all the more painful for them. From March 2022, when both Janice and Esmeralda were formally charged with murder, to both being found guilty on May 17, 2022, the case was followed closely by many in the Philippines. Janice was sentenced to 31 years in prison, while Esmeralda received a 29-year sentence. Both sentences came with the stipulation that they would serve them under the supervision of the Department of Social Welfare and Development until their 21st birthdays, after which they would be transferred to adult prisons. Gwynn and Lewis's parents had mixed feelings about the outcomes of the trial. While they acknowledged that the courts had delivered the most severe punishment possible under the law, they felt that the existing laws were too lenient. Their greatest grievance, however, was Janice's complete lack of remorse. Despite the conviction, Cruz and Lovella were outspoken in their opposition to the Republic Act 9344, which limits the legal accountability of minors. Under this law, the minimum age of criminal liability is 15, and individuals between ages of 15 and 18 can be held responsible for their actions but are placed in youth centers or rehabilitation programs rather than adult prisons. The law prevents minors like Janice from being charged as adults, despite the horrific and shocking nature of their crimes, which one can argue children should not be capable of executing, let alone planning. In the US and in many states, they would have been tried as adults. The parents felt that Janice's age should not absolve her of her full responsibility, particularly in a case where she orchestrated such a brutal act of violence. This sentiment was echoed by many who felt that the law was simply too lenient for cases as severe as this one. Cruz and Lovella have publicly stated that they believe this act should be amended so that those who commit violent crimes at a young age can be held fully accountable for their actions. The law's focus on rehabilitation rather than retribution left them feeling that the justice system had failed their family. Now, some more shocking facts from the investigation. It was also revealed that Lewis had gone out of his way to show kindness for his newly adopted sister, giving up his room for Janice and sleeping on the living room couch. He still fell victim to the brutality that unfolded. The entire family had shown nothing but kindness and love to Janice. I see this case as the most inexcusable form of cruelty and betrayal. The Maguads while still Janice's legal adopted parents have refused to meet with her, especially Cruz, because he has stated he cannot control himself if he ever sees her in person for what she did to his family, and I can't say I disagree with him. This is Victor. To support my work on such cases and others, please remember to give this video a thumbs up, and if you'd like to go further, you're welcome to join the channel's membership. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.